from Gregular.
I've been writing songs since I was about 16 years old. Not all of them are good. Actually, probably over 50% of them could even be considered bad. For the last album I recorded, Death and Taxes, I wrote over 20 songs, and 12 made it onto the album. The writing process can take a week or sometimes a month. A few songs have even been shelved for years before their completion. For some odd reason, the best songs are usually the ones that are written in a matter of hours or even minutes. Sometimes I get an idea, and it kind of feels like the words and melody are just being beamed directly into my head. Like genius has been traveling through the cosmos for millions of light years from some unknown galaxy, and my head just happened to get in the way at the exact right moment to intercept. When it comes to the longest-running U.S. primetime television series, it's perhaps a similar story. However, where I'm usually in the privacy of my jam space waiting for a bright idea, our hero was in the waiting room of producer James L. Brooks's office. Mr. Brooks was producing the Tracy Ulman show, a British actress, comedian, singer, dancer, etc., who was trying to break into American television. The program was a variety show, a kind of mixed bag whatever hour that Brooks was trying to patch together. A young and not quite yet famous Paula Abdul was in charge of choreography for the dance numbers, and whoever else was willing to show up or maybe needed the work was probably also on the payroll for other assorted tasks. Brooks had wanted cartoon shorts before and or after the commercial breaks, and a comic strip called Life in Hell had come to mind. The comic strip was around since the early 80s and was carried in 250 weekly newspapers. It seemed the perfect candidate for an animation adaptation on a variety show. Fearing the loss of ownership rights to Life in Hell and losing control of his life's work, the hero of our story decided to create a new concept to pitch to Brooks. Some claim that he came up with the idea the night before at home. Others say it was on the ride over to Brooks's office. If the legend is true, however, the longest running TV show in U.S. history was thrown together in 5 minutes by Matt Groening in a waiting room. And bam! The Simpsons came into existence. Matt Groening, creator of The Simpsons, was born February 15th, 1954, in Portland, Oregon. His first commercially recognized cartoon, Life in Hell, was described by him as every boomer idealist's conception of what adult existence in the 80s had turned out to be. I think what he meant was no flying cars or food in pill form. We got stuck with congested freeways, infomercials, and diabetes. Groening had moved to LA in 1977, the same year he started the cartoon. The actual day he rolled into town was a Friday in August. It was 102 degrees Fahrenheit. His car had broken down in the fast lane of the Hollywood freeway, and a drunken radio DJ was giving his last program on a local radio station, bitterly denouncing his station's manager. I guess you kind of need a bit of a sense of humor to live in LA. The stars of Life in Hell were anthropomorphic rabbits, which were also featured in several episodes of The Simpsons as background characters. A homosexual couple named Akbar and Jeff were also in the mix, who both wore shirts that resembled Charlie Brown's shirt. I'm not quite sure why, and I would love to hear theories in the comments. The comic was pretty brave to be gay positive at a time when almost any mainstream movie or comedian saw homosexuality as something to ridicule, and I feel a lot of that spirit was carried over to The Simpsons. The shorts of The Simpsons that were shown on the Tracy Ullman show weren't really that funny or anything. Not even like a let a little bit more air out of my nose than usual laugh, like I used to react to most jokes on the internet in the mid-2000s. I do have to admit, there is something hypnotizing about them though. Kind of like you feel you are sitting through them, but when it ends, you wish it lasted a little bit longer, hoping that a punchline or another part of the joke is yet to come, and you'll be rolling on the floor laughing your ass off as depicted in the modern acronym. The Simpsons seems to me like the first cartoon to really bridge that gap of mass appeal to both adults and kids. In the 80s, I was only a kid, so I'm not sure if there was an influx of cartoons not quite raunchy enough to scar children for life, but raunchy enough to get a laugh from a middle-aged person in between shoveling handfuls of salty snacks into their pie holes. Maybe that's the secret of success, the perfect amount of raunch. Nevertheless, Fox had enough faith in the concept, or perhaps so few other options, that they gave The Simpsons a chance at prime time. The first season of The Simpsons, as a half-hour standalone primetime so-and-so, was aired December 17th, 1989. The season had 13 episodes, and composer Danny Elfman wrote the score for the show's intro music. Elfman has music credits on countless movies, including my personal fave score of his, Beetlejuice, which I have on vinyl. Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire was the first episode aired. Being the token Christmas special, it was a bit of a strange choice to start it all off. Fox had originally intended a spring release for the first episode entitled Some Enchanting Evening, which kind of did a better job at starting on page 1 and introducing the characters. The producers felt the original animation was so bad that 70% of it needed to be redone, and if the next episode turned out the same, the bosses were ready to pull the plug on the whole project. Season 2 aired October 11th, 1990, with the Bart Gets an F episode. Matt Groening, James L. Brooks, and Sam Simon held down the executive producer roles as they did the previous season, and the vast majority of the writing team were still on board. This was the point when I really started to watch The Simpsons. Some of the unpredictable humor and quick cuts started to appear, which episodes in later seasons really embraced. I think it was the beginning of the true genius of the show. You can watch an episode multiple times and catch different jokes every time. Where other shows would spend an entire scene building up to one joke, The Simpsons was more of a rapid-fire joke after joke after joke. Not just one-dimensional comedy, but visual jokes, psychological, political. You could sit back and laugh at the slapstick gags, or you could watch a bit closer and chuckle at the comical details packed into every episode. Season 2 was the beginning of the Treehouse of Horrors, an annual Halloween-themed episode that was broken into 3 different stories. 1990 also saw the release of The Simpsons Sing the Blues, an album of a few Simpsons originals, as well as cover songs sung by the voice actors of The Simpsons in character. I also have it on vinyl. It's a fun album to listen to, but not really making it into my super elite section. Season 3 hit our television sets September 19th, 1991. Al Jean and Mike Weiss took over as executive producers on most of the episodes. Both had been with the show since the start and had writing credits on a handful of episodes from the previous seasons. Most of the writing staff remained intact for season 3, with a few rad additions for an episode here and there. By this point, The Simpsons was pretty much a household name, being merchandised to its full potential. The Simpsons arcade game was released that year, which was a pump-in-the-quarters beat-em-up kind of deal, as well as an NES release entitled Bart vs. the Space Mutants. Season 3 had so many iconic episodes. I could pretty much waste the rest of the video discussing them all. Some of my personal faves include Flaming Moe's episode, Bart the Murderer, which was the first appearance of Fat Tony, Colonel Homer, and the Auto Show episode. Many of the original writers of the show would call season 4 their final season. Al Jean and Mike continued as executive producers, and a few other writers would join the ranks, including Conan O'Brien, who penned episodes New Kid on the Block and Marge vs. the Monorail, which might be one of my all-time fave episodes. September 24th, 1992 was the day the season kicked off. Being the last season for so many of the writing staff, an inside joke of kind of phoning in the last few episodes came to realization with the rake scene in the Cape Fear episode. The gag just kind of went on and on, reusing the same sound bites each time Sideshow Bob stepped on another rake. Cape Fear was actually not aired until season 5, however, was a holdover from season 4. The Simpsons switched animation houses that year from Klasky Supo to Film Roman, hoping to improve wages and working conditions for the animators. Despite season 5 having a bunch of new crew steering the ship, I feel the vast majority of the comical integrity of The Simpsons remained intact, if not surpassed. Much of the writing staff was new. However, John Swartzwelder and others who had been there since the start still penned several episodes. David Merkin took over as executive producer, as Al Jean and Mike left to produce their own show, The Critic. I remember watching The Critic, but maybe it was a bit over my head at the time. John Lovitz voiced the main character, and other Simpsons voice actors were also on the team, like Nancy Cartwright. So it had a lot of potential, I think. Maybe it was a riding on the coattails of the Simpsons situation, but the show only went 2 seasons, and never quite found enough traction on its own to really take off. I'll definitely give it another chance at some point. Conan O'Brien left halfway through season 5 to host his own show, Late Night with Conan O'Brien. It seems it wasn't really planned that way, and he actually had to break his contract to do so. He only wrote 2 episodes that season. Homer Goes to College, and one of the Treehouse of Horrors segments. I had always thought Conan O'Brien had a bigger role on the show during those years. Season 6 was the first attempt at producing 25 episodes for a season. The pressure was on, and Al Jean and Mike Weiss returned to produce 2 of the 25 episodes to try to relieve some of the stress on all the staff. David Merkin was still steering the ship, and as previous seasons, most writers were still on board with a few additions here and there. By this point, reruns of The Simpsons were on TV at 5:30, and 6 p.m. on several TV stations, so I was getting a triple dose every day. The humor of The Simpsons was becoming a cornerstone of my personality. Almost every situation in real life could be related back to an episode. My friends and I would quote Simpsons lines back and forth if we got to a point where we kind of ran out of things to say, but didn't want to stop talking to each other. Seasons 7 to 10 was still super duper funny, and a lot of the same team was producing and writing the episodes. Bill Oakley and John Weinstein produced seasons 7 and 8, and Mike Scully 9 and 10. Many new writers came on board, and others left over the 4 seasons, but some longtime vets like John Swartzwelder and David Stern still remained. Perhaps it's because so much of season 2 to 8 was what aired on reruns, and those were the episodes I rewatched past nausea, but season 9 and 10 was when I started to not remember episodes with the same detail. My life just kind of got busier around that time, which I'm sure contributed, but I just don't feel as attached to seasons 9 and 10 as the previous ones. Aside from dipping in for the Treehouse of Horror episode and a few others, I don't think I've actually watched much of season 11. For me, it just didn't quite have the same tone, the same rewatchability. The episodes I saw were still funny, but not for the same deep-seated reasons. The humor seemed cheaper and just kind of reaching for the low-hanging fruit, rather than drawing references you might have had to actually look up to get the whole joke. If you watched an episode a few times, you probably had caught everything and didn't really have to watch it again. This is definitely up for debate, and only my opinion. Not having TV for years and years kinda literally pulled the plug on me keeping up to date with The Simpsons, so maybe that's another reason why I kinda lost interest. I'll always love The Simpsons, and can still put an episode on from those first 8 seasons and laugh my ass off. 2007, I watched The Simpsons movie and felt a strange sense of nostalgia, but at the same time, didn't fully recognize the characters. Kinda like seeing someone from your youth as an adult and realizing you don't really have a lot in common anymore. That you have both grown, but kind of in opposite ways. Other shows have come and gone over the years that have kind of given me the same feeling as those early Simpsons episodes. Even funnier in some ways, but never quite the same genius. Maybe everything is just a time and a place in one's life. I still feel super lucky to have been around when the first season aired, and will always appreciate and idolize the early writers and team that made it all possible.
that case, I sentence you to a lifetime of horror on Monster Island. Don't worry, it's just a name.
It was just a name.
What he meant is that Monster Island is actually a peninsula.